What is up, everyone? It's your host again, Carlos Ponce here. And this is another live episode of Advancio Talks. And if you are just discovering us, welcome. But if you've been here since the very beginning, you know what we are about. So, Advancio Talks is where we sit down with the people actually building the future of the business and technology in different spaces and verticals, not just talking about it, but doing it. CTOs, founders, venture capitalists, the folks actually making decisions that matter. So, whether you're drinking coffee, commuting, or just curious about what's actually happening in tech and business, well, stick around. Okay, because today we have David Gritz, and I'm sure David's got stories, that insights you won't hear anywhere else. Well, let's jump right in. And David, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here. Now, you're the managing director of InsureTech Fund. So, David, welcome to the show. David, tell us a little bit about you, David.
Thanks for having me, Carlos. Really appreciate the opportunity to be on the show and share some insights to your audience. About me, in short, is I started my career and went to school as an engineer. Went to work at a IT consulting firm that helped Fortune companies to manage their core systems while they migrated to new things. So really got to see the ugly things that happen behind the scenes at big companies. And then, started my entrepreneurial journey. I started a construction and house flipping business in Philadelphia. I
Mhm.
ran an ed tech startup and incubator that was in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. And then I got into this whole world, which I now call home of insurance. I helped a insurance company do a turnaround, and then we ultimately launched an InsureTech startup in the workplace safety space. We sold that. I spent some time at law school and helping a group in Silicon Valley that did research on insurance, and then ultimately started the businesses that I run today, InsureTech New York, which is the largest ecosystem of InsureTech in the US, and InsureTech Fund, where we invest in seed stage InsureTech startups.
Great. Yeah, thank you for elaborating on your background, David. So now, excuse me, very untimely. I'm sorry, folks. This is totally involuntary. I swear. David, tell us a little bit about InsureTech Fund. What was the genesis of the company? How did it come about?
Yeah, so our fund really came about as a result of our community. So InsureTech New York runs conferences and events. We help insurance companies with research on trends. We have two accelerator programs. And what happened is we were working with a number of our insurance carrier clients and doing research on potential investment opportunities or acquisition opportunities for them. And we just kept identifying solid companies, but realized that most insurers don't invest in companies until they have 1, 2, or even 3 million in revenue.
Mhm.
And if we could find them earlier, then that was an arbitrage opportunity where we could find great companies, invest in them before the large corporates invest, and then ultimately create opportunities for ourselves and the investors in our fund. So we started our fund to really capitalize on that opportunity.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, again, thank you for telling us a little bit about InsureTech Fund. And I'm sure there are going to be more questions as we move along through the course of the conversation. But I would like to dive into today's topic because I think it's going to be relevant for more than one. Definitely. So, we're going to be discussing betting on InsurTech's future. So, how venture capital is rewiring insurance from the inside out. And the first question, David, that I have for you is why did you feel that this topic was relevant for today's day and age in the InsurTech space?
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, venture capital has gone into almost every industry and changed the way that it functions. So if you think about when we went through COVID, what allowed us to get through it, relatively quickly is the development of mRNA vaccines, which was ultimately, started by venture capital backed companies. And so within the insurance industry, it's a relatively old industry. It's been around for more than 400 years in some form or fashion. And ultimately, venture capital has the opportunity to invest in companies that either are developing new products that are oftentimes ignored by traditional larger insurance companies because those are small niches, or to actually rewire them from the inside out, which is creating actual infrastructure inside of the insurers that will make them operate more efficiently. And oftentimes it's better to build that outside, and then have the corporates buy it because it's just, they're not structurally designed to be able to build it themselves.
David, I understand that you co-founded both InsureTech NY and InsureTech Fund. So let me ask you this: what moment made you realize that insurance was the industry that you wanted to disrupt?
It wasn't really one specific moment. It was more like a process, right? So
Mhm.
I joined a friend of mine's company called Charter Partners, which was essentially offering insurance for workers' comp and commercial auto for industrial companies, and was helping them, turn around the business, which ultimately led us to spin off our insurtech startup called Zero. But in that process, I learned about some of the inefficiencies and challenges of the industry. And I had experience from my previous business with building an incubator. And I think going through that process allowed me to realize that there's something that could fit in between incubating innovation and the industry, and combining those together would be a good solid use of things that I've learned.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And InsureTech NY, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that InsureTech NY has grown into the largest InsureTech community in North America. So tell us, what does it take to build a community that actually moves an industry?
Yeah, so I mean, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, hard to say whether we move an industry or not. We make the best impact that we can. But in order to really build a community, there's two components. One is people, and the other is programs. So
Hmm.
for people, ultimately, you have to bring people together. So whether it's conferences, smaller events and meetups, or it's other gatherings, you need to, create the collisions. I think that was the Tony Hsieh phrase, the founder of Zappos, that said, like, if you can have people collide and meet with each other in ways that they don't naturally, that creates innovation. So that's one, vector of a successful community, is the frequency of collisions. The second component is structured programs. So you need to have programs that support the businesses or the outcomes that you want. So for us, we have a couple accelerator programs to help launch companies or get them to the next plateau. And we do programming for our insurance carrier members where we bring them together for executive roundtables and they can learn from each other.
Hmm.
And I think the combination of all of those activities will spur people to change their behavior, make different decisions, and ultimately improve the industry.
Okay, okay. Um, well, and I'm sure you've like seen probably hundreds of startups through the accelerator. So let me ask you this: what is the most common mistake that InsurTech founders make that kills their chances with investors?
So, in terms of kills their chances with investors, I mean, there's a couple, but I would say the most common one is not having a clear way to distribute your product. So if you're selling an insurance product, how are you going to go to market? How can you demonstrate that that go to market will work? And how do you incrementally build, manage, and track it? If you're
Hmm.
developing software, how are you going to make sure you have the capital base to withstand a 24-month sales cycle? What are you going to do to make that successful? How do you improve the throughput? So founders that have not put a lot of thought, have not done it previously in their career or demonstrated it, those things get found out pretty quickly in diligence, and ultimately will determine whether a startup can raise money or not.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, okay. David, you have a portfolio of what, to 20, 22 companies so far,
Yeah.
right? 22 companies. Okay. So tell me, if you, I mean, you're clearly selective. So what does a founder have to prove to get your conviction?
Yeah, so there's a number of things. I mean, the distribution point is central and very important to us. So we're not going to invest in tech-based founders that only develop the technology and it's really cool. Like, that's great, but if they can't sell it, it's not going to survive. So that's one component. The second component that is important to us is deep domain expertise. So they have to demonstrate that within whatever they're building, they understand the mechanics of it, they have the customer perspective, and they've built a product that is responsive to the customer needs. And then a third factor is capital efficiency. So anyone could build anything with an unlimited budget, but what we care about is, are they going to be good stewards of our capital? So
Hmm.
there's different points in time that prove that, right? So how much did it cost them to launch the product? How much did it cost them to get their first customer? What's their cost of acquisition? How many team members do they have to accomplish a certain task? Are the founders paying themselves market or below market? So all of those factors come into play to us determine, are they going to be capital efficient and good stewards of our capital?
Hmm. Okay. You know, every the way I see it is, and what I'm hearing is, every project has an early stage or a seed stage, right? So, how do you? I'm curious. How do you evaluate a team's ability to navigate the regulatory complexity of insurance, especially at the seed stage, right? When there's so little track record, how do you evaluate the team's ability to navigate it?
Yeah, so I mean, since you're talking about regulation, I'm assuming that you're focusing on insurance products. So
Yeah.
there's a number of factors that come out very clearly from the beginning. So the first is just the simple question, like, have they ever launched a product before? So it could be at another startup, it could have been at an insurance carrier. And if they've done that, they at least have a general perspective. But the second is, there's certain vendors or um, partners that you need in that journey, because most startups will not internalize all of the resources. So, for
Hmm.
example, to come up with the pricing, typically companies hire an actuarial consulting firm. To manage their licenses, they might use a third-party software provider to be able to do that, or hire a consulting firm to help them with that.
Hmm.
To develop their policy language, they might use a law firm to draft it or base it off of an existing policy that they could license from a standards organization like ISO or AAIS.
Hmm.
So, as within probably a 10-minute conversation, I could ask the founders 5 questions, and by the answers to those questions, I'll know if they understand what's necessary to develop a product in a regulatory environment at a low risk of violating any rules or regulations.
Okay. Okay. Now let's move on from the thesis to the market and technology trends. Actually, let's get into the action. That's where the action starts to happen. So, the first, and in that context, I would like to ask you the following. MGAs have a major category in the InsureTech wave, right? But you have spoken about the difficulty they face at accessing carrier capacity. Is that a problem is that a problem getting better or worse? What would you say?
So I would say it's not necessarily one specific answer to it. It's more like a bimodal population. So
Hmm.
if you're an inexperienced founder that's never launched a product, written a policy form, done underwriting before, it's getting more difficult because the previous like decade of insurtech founders have lost reinsurers a lot of money when they didn't have any experience. But if you've launched a product, if you've managed a distribution team, if you've drafted policy forms, and I could say you know what you're doing, it's gotten easier because there's more carriers that are willing to lend their balance sheets or provide licensing and paper today than there used to be 10, 20, or 30 years ago.
Okay. And what's a let's say a corner of the insurance market that's still massively underserved by technology? For example, one that most people aren't paying attention to yet.
Yeah, so there's two. One is specialty commercial. So think like needs of middle market that in aggregate could be large, but on an individual basis, you personally don't come across every day. So
Right.
think like marine cargo shipping or general aviation for smaller planes. So think like hobby planes or private jets or even the space area. There's only a couple startups that have developed insurance products for satellites or space launches. But you could think of almost every industry has its own quirks and insurance needs. So if you're in supply chain and logistics, think about the cold chain and the coverage that you need for things that are refrigerated in transport and the cost or risk of that fails. Or think about what's happening in the world right now. There's such thing as kidnap and ransom insurance for executives that have to travel to high risk countries. All of those areas are niches, but when you bubble them up, many or most of them are multi-billion dollars in premiums or market size opportunities, and they're run relatively manually. So that's one. And then the second is, I think, life insurance in general has been very under indexed as an opportunity set to digitize and transform. So anything from more specialized term life policies or moving down market to middle market or lower income individuals, or even the opposite side of it. So digitized offerings for permanent life insurance.
Okay. And we couldn't, I mean, in today's day and age, as you can imagine, we definitely need to touch on AI because it's everywhere. Like it's like the air we breathe, right? And there's no way around it. So AI is reshaping every industry, but I believe, uh, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that insurance has unique constraints. Let's say actuarial models, regulatory oversight, legacy data. So where would you say that AI is actually delivering in InsureTech right now, and where is it mostly hype?
Sure. So I think areas where it's delivering is on, the claims or customer service side of things, being able to take large files about an accident, a litigation, a workplace injury, and condensing them into summaries, triaging the claim and helping, them get resolved in a more timely or cost-efficient manner. Where it's more hype, I would say, is being able to change the underwriting process in the middle market. So, yes, there are some companies that are implementing technologies and making it easier, but no one's gotten to the point where they can like replace the underwriter with an AI agent that will understand everything about, let's say, a commercial building and then be able to independently value the risk and put a price on it. There still essentially has to be a human in the loop, and most companies in this space haven't really done anything yet, even though the startup hype is we can do it all for you and we don't need underwriters anymore.
Okay, cool. And specifically Advancio, the show's sponsors, they work with companies building custom software, and AI solutions across different industries. From your vantage point as an investor, what does good tech infrastructure look like inside an insure tech startup?
Yeah, so I mean, there's certain requirements if you're going to be selling to insurance carrier, right? You need to have proper risk and security controls, whether it's the ISO standards that you have to meet, like 17001, or SOC compliance, preferably SOC 2. So having those, having the proper cybersecurity infrastructure, data controls, so you meet CCPA and GDPR and other state-based or industry-based like HIPAA data standards and requirements. So those are like the table stakes, like having that foundation. But
Hmm.
then beyond that, I think building an extensible infrastructure that is either modular, API based, so it can ingest other third-party data, or I would say, it's built in like the microservices type of functionality. So you can improve different parts of the application without having to overhaul the entire thing all at once.
Okay. Let's talk about, move on to building and scaling. Distribution is often cited as the hardest problem in insurtech. So, what would you say are the most successful companies in your portfolio cracking it?
Yeah, so we had one company that recently got acquired by Guidewire called Quanti, and I think what allowed them to be very successful is two things. One is the founders understood the problem space because they were actuaries selling actuarial software. So what better people to develop the software than the ones that used to use it?
Hmm.
So that's one piece that makes distribution important is if the people who built the software are the same people they're selling to, then they can relate and understand and communicate the same language. The second is leveraging partners that have greater brand recognition or heft than what you have. So they leverage actuarial consultants to act as either system integrators or partners to deliver their software in the same way that they delivered like the new product pricing. And I think by going to market with the systems integrators, or in their case the actuarial consultants, it got them to skip the dating phase where they were just getting to know them, because the actuary consultants already had master service agreements with the clients, already had open projects, already had relationships up and down the hierarchy.
Um, well, first of all, thank you for elaborating on that part. I was particularly curious about the distribution side of it. Now let's talk about, well, first of all, we're approaching the final segment of today's conversation, and I like to now open up a little bit and think of the bigger picture. Venture capital has pulled back from InsureTech after the 2021 boom. Is this a reset, a shakeout, or something more permanent?
It's a reset, I would say, because the industry is kind of split up between independent venture capitalists like us and then the corporate ones, which is probably about 60 to 80 insurance companies on every given year that are either have dedicated funds or invest off of their balance sheet. And the ones that are investing off their balance sheet, that's permanent in a sense that they are in the industry, they're committed to making the industry better, they're going to keep investing. It's just a question of how much or what velocity. The VCs that are independent, some are focused on insurtech like us, and others are, fintech or generalists, and they tend to, go in and out of the space. And I think there was a period where insurtech was hot. It's not hot anymore. So, that group maybe left, but the people that are still in it are still very much committed. So I think the benefit of the industry is insurance has a lot of capital and it can invest to improve itself. So there's always going to be like a base load availability of investment. The question is just how many of the outside of insurance investors will come into it in any given year.
Okay. Okay. Um, Now, if you, let's say, if you could change one thing about how the insurance industry approaches technology partnerships, what would it be, David?
Yeah, so it'd just be a simple thing. It's like if I could wave a magic wand and have every person I know that works at an insurance carrier be curious and have a try it first mindset,
Hmm.
opposed to either a not invented here or I just want to make it out for my last few years of retirement without changing anything, then that would change the industry in like a year or two.
For I was listening to you know, and I was you know you have looked at InsureTech globally, right? From Israeli startups to Swiss conferences. So I'm curious, where in the world is the most interesting insurtech innovation happening right now outside of the US?
I would probably say London because it's such a dense market in terms of in a few square blocks. You can, be at Lloyd's of London. You can talk to underwriters that are very open-minded. There's a lot of startups there. I mean, it's probably tied with New York of the highest insurtech startup density. There's a fair amount of investors. There's a lot of early stage angels because of the EIS program. So, I think that's probably the best market outside of the US at the moment.
Okay, yeah. I was kind of curious because, well, I'm still. You are the expert, and I'm just asking the questions from the layman's perspective, so I can learn more. But I'm sure this is going to be of interest to a lot of folks out there who might be looking to get into the space, different angles, right? So either in the U.S. or outside of the U.S. because we do have we have audiences. Part of our audience is also watching us from other places in the world. So I have one more question because we're running out of time. For let's say for a software or AI company like those in Advancio's orbit that wants to break into the insurance vertical, what is the single most important thing they need to understand before making that move?
Yeah, I think it's simple, like depending on the niche or area, you just need to understand your customer, right? There's a
Mhm.
lot of people that jump in and just say, oh, it's financial services, just like banking. But ultimately, insurance companies don't think of themselves as banks. And if you treat them like that, you're not going to get a good result. But if you understand your customer, what they want, then it'll make life way easier.
Thank you for answering that question for me, David. Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time, so we need to ask you. You know, for those of you who are watching or now or will be watching in the future, how can viewers and those interested in what you're doing, how can they get a hold of you? How can they contact you? Are you on LinkedIn or your email, your website? Can you share those pieces of information with us with the audience?
Yeah, best way to contact me is really for LinkedIn. If you just look me up, David Gritz, and you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Also, if you go on our site, we have a
There it
contact
is, right
form.
there.
Yeah,
It's LinkedIn, David Gritz, one word, right?
yeah,
Perfect. Okay, good. What is your company's website?
yeah, it's just insuretechny.com.
Let's see. Would it be okay? I think we have it. Yes, do have it here. So there you have, it, folks. Make sure to write it down and visit insuretechny.com. And the last piece, David, if someone wants to email you, do you have an email to share?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's just my name at our domain. You could definitely use that. Not always the best at email, so if you want to try our contact at InsureTech NY, that works too. And
Okay.
one of my team members can get back to you.
Perfect. Awesome. So we have your LinkedIn, your email. Okay, let's do it one more time just in case someone's writing notes. David Gritz, one word on LinkedIn, and then we have the website InsureTechNY.com, and finally the email is david@InsureTech.com. So that being said, David, the only thing left for me to do is thank you big time for having been with us on the show today. We really appreciate it. And for those of you who are watching, remember that every Wednesday at 11 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, we have conversations with those creating the future. Making the moves that actually make a difference in the world of business and technology. So remember, Wednesdays at 11 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. Stay tuned on Advancio.com for upcoming interviews with specialists and luminaries like David. So David, again, thank you so much. And the rest of you, see you next time. David, please stay with me as we go off the air, and see you next week.
You're welcome.